Please help me give a warm welcome to Catherine Berman.
Thank you, Willow. Can you guys hear me okay? I am so glad I wore this. It is so hot up here. So you're very far, and I apologize because I wish you were closer, but hopefully I'll bring you closer in spirit as we talk together. So I want to talk to you today about this funny word we use all the time called networking. And even as I say networking, I can see different expressions in the audience. I see some grimaces, I see some squirms, I see some people smiling. You know, but you ask almost anyone to talk to you about their relationship with networking, and usually what you're going to get is a discussion on how uncomfortable it makes them feel, how unnatural it typically feels, and then often how useless it really is for them. So for something that's talked about all the time, for many of us, it's actually not that useful. And yet, as a society, we spend millions of dollars on networking, on conferences, on trade shows, on networking events, on online tools and resources. So why is it? Why is it that we keep investing all this money into something that right now most of us actually think is broken? Well, let's talk a little bit about the origins of networking. Maybe we can see why we're where we're at today. If you think about how all of this hype around networking began, you can probably take a little logic and look at how we moved from the industrial age to the information age, and how with the advent of technology, everything became easier for us as a workforce, supposedly. And so as things became increasingly easier for us, two main things happened. Number one, an increase of what was expected of us, an increase of the demands of our performance. We're expected to sell more, produce more, forge more partnerships, do things quicker. And at the same time, a decrease in the time we're given to do it. So increase in our demands to perform and decrease in times. And so what we started to think is, how are we going to possibly meet those demands? And so many bright people came up with this idea, well, if we just increase our exposure to more people, that may help us get to those demands. And not just any exposure, because if you want exposure, you can hop on a bus or a train and find some random people, but targeted exposure. What if you put me in a room with people that might be interested in what I have to sell or talk about? Well, then perhaps I can actually meet that demand. And with that increased performance demand, as we all know, and as many of us feel, comes fear, comes anxiety, comes pressure. So then we see lots of different networking options come our way. And depending on how long you've been in the workforce, you've probably experienced many of these, from the traditional conferences to the networking receptions at night, to the speed dating networking, to getting your first LinkedIn invitation, and then now insert whatever online tool you currently use to network, right? And that's where we are today, is we've got all these varieties, these wonderful mixes of ways to network that's supposed to be really useful and good for us. But the problem with that is, it only gets us halfway. So the first reason that networking is broken right now is it's only half of the equation. It does increase our exposure and our targeted exposure, right? So we do get to be in a room full of people maybe otherwise we wouldn't have met. Okay, we're here. Then what? What do you do next? And that's where networking really fails right now. The what do you do next is quite absent. And going back to where this all came from, if you think about, we come from a place of fear and anxiety and tension and pressure, and bosses telling us to do more with less time and be efficient with your time. With all that in our head, when we end up here, the next part of the equation actually becomes highly transactional. And what do I mean by that? Let me offer you an example and tell me if this at all resonates. You're invited to a cocktail reception to network, meet new business contacts. You walk in, you go to get a glass of wine, and you talk to the first person you meet, also getting a glass of wine. Her name's Jane. Says it right on her name tag. So then you and Jane start talking, and you start this awkward dance of qualifying questions to figure each other out, to figure out if you can meet each other's agenda. And what I mean by agenda, and I don't mean it in a pejorative fashion, but it's really why you went to network to begin with, right? you're looking for a new job, you're looking to get a new customer, you're looking to find a new employee for your firm, whatever reason brought you there that night. You and Jane start this awkward line of questioning to figure out if you can really meet each other's need. Okay, you exchange some niceties, you exchange business cards, and you're off on your merry way to do this 10 more times, let's say, maybe 5. You go home that night, you put your business cards on the desk, and then maybe, if you're one of those very rare individuals, you actually follow up with those business cards, and you send a lovely email to Jane. It was great to meet you. Would you be interested in my insert agenda? Now, we think we all know the chances of that happening and the probability for success in that scenario. Low probability that Jane's going to be interested in your agenda and that she, out of all the people in that room, was the right fit for you. Low probability that Jane has time to work on your agenda, and even lower probability that Jane cares about your agenda, given what we just shared. And yet that is the networking pattern I hear again and again and again and again from folks who are out there very well-intentioned to get their agenda met, well-intentioned. And so that's the second problem with networking. When left to our own devices, under increased pressure, that second half of the equation becomes incredibly transactional. It's like computers. It's like machines. Business card to business card, question to question. Can you meet my needs? And I'll share something that is actually a no-brainer and very intuitive to all of you. That's not how we're hardwired. Study after study after study has told us these 3 things. Each of us want to feel seen and heard. Each of us want to feel a sense of connection. Each of us want to feel a sense of belonging. It's how we are hardwired. And so when we move to this transactional space, eureka, it feels unnatural. It's why it feels so inherently uncomfortable and inauthentic, because it is. Because it is. But again, we're forced with time and pressure, and this is just what we do. So the third reason that networking is really broken right now, it's also unsustainable. If you are doing that kind of transactional approach, think about how many conferences and events you have to go to achieve your agenda. And for those of you who have tried it, you know it's a lot. You've got to do a volume play. If you're going to do that kind of interaction, send a lot of follow-up meals, harass a lot of people to get to your agenda, and you're going to burn out. It's absolutely unsustainable in its current form. So I've talked a little bit about why networking is broken, so then you say, Catherine, all right, so tell me, what's the alternative? I still have an agenda here. Well, I'd like to propose today that we move from this thing called transactional responses to something called trusted relationships. And what do I mean by that? I mean, focus on creating circles of relationships than endless threads of email. Focus on learning about a person and feeling a sense of connection, then diving into an agenda that feels quick and efficient when it generally is neither. That's what I mean about trusted relationships. But let me dive a little bit further. How do you test this thing out? How do you try to build trusted relationships that are actually authentic? And we all already do it. We just turn off that piece of our brain often when we're in a business context. But think about your close friends and family. Those are trusted relationships. So 3 tips to start building some trusted relationships and stop that endless cycle of the broken network. Tip number 1 is you have to get out of that qualify game. Almost every event you go to right now, whether it's a trade show or a conference or a networking reception or whatever you sign up for, there is so much information about one another. I could probably figure out what every single one of you do and what you did the last job and what your title is if I just leave this stage and hop on LinkedIn and do 10 minutes of research. That's the truth, right? I see a lot of heads nod. And so to show up to one of these events and not have done your homework of who you think you should meet, right? It's a missed opportunity. So what I'm advocating, number 1, is before you go to that next event, pull down that list of attendees, do your homework, and find those 5 people that you want to meet. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be the 5 best people you should meet, human error, but find those 5 targeted people that you would hope to meet for whatever reason, for whatever agenda you currently have. And those are the people you want to beeline it to talk to. Now, at this point, sometimes I get people saying, well, Catherine, isn't that transactional, beelining it to just one person? And my response is, if anyone has ever beelined it to you and walked up to you and said, I love what you just did. I was reading all about you before tonight. Tell me more. It is far from transactional. It's actually incredibly flattering. So go ahead and beeline it to those 5 people that you want, and they will feel wonderful, and you will get to engage in an actual conversation. So get out of the qualify dance. As much as you can, do your homework of who you want to meet that night. And I'd also say a quick aside, open it up to meet the random. And most of you who have experienced this know, sometimes it is that random person that you had no interest in meeting or really no understanding of why they'd be helpful that turns out to be your best contact. So I say leave some extra room for those serendipitous encounters, absolutely. And if you do end up going to one of those receptions where all you get is the person's name, the organizer will not release the list of attendees, I say make the best of it. I say treat it like a wedding. Don't go in there with going, I wonder if they can suit my agenda and play that qualify game. But again, you treat it like a wedding. You're here, I'm here, let's all have a good time. It brings out a natural curiosity in the human being as opposed to a direct line of agenda setting. So number 1, get out of the qualify game altogether. The second part I would say is the idea of follow-up. We talked a little bit about follow-up and that a lot of people don't follow up. The reality is there is an authentic type of follow-up that you can do that is not about sending an email with your agenda and hoping for a strong response. So to the extent that you can really learn about that human being and have an interesting way to continue the conversation, and more importantly, just continue the conversation. An email that just says, I met you, I know it was brief, I know you made that interesting point about X, and I'd love to take you for a coffee to learn more. Do you have a half hour for coffee? Just that idea of I want to learn more about you is a more authentic approach to exploration than, would you like to buy my product? Would you take a look at my resume? And it has to be an earnest message, not a fabricated one. And how do we get to that earnestness? How do we get to that authenticity? Point number 3, tip number 3, change your focus. When you get in front of that targeted stranger, particularly when you've done your homework, you have a wonderful opportunity to take off your agenda hat and just focus on the connection. Instead of asking the question like many of us do when we're in front of that targeted stranger of, I wonder if they're really going to help me, ask the question of, I wonder what they're passionate about. I wonder what I can learn from her. I wonder what makes that person tick. I wonder how I can help that person. 2 prevailing schools of thought say absolutely when you're forging a new connection, starting on the foot of number 1, how can I help this person? And number 2, what are they passionate about is a fantastic icebreaker no matter how you look at it. Because when we start talking about things we're passionate about and we start talking about ways we can help one another, a lot of that transactional coat we wear comes off, is shed. So that's the third tip. Change your focus from your agenda to the agenda of connection. So you've got 3 tips to start moving towards this trusted relationship. A lot of other things I can say about it, but it's a good starting point. And what I'd share is this is not just a theory, this is a very successful practice. I am not encouraging you to abandon your agenda. Whatever it is you have out there, the goal that you seek, whether it's changing careers altogether, whether it's getting that promotion, whether it's landing those 10 clients, I encourage you to go after that with reckless abandon. But I'm just saying I think there's actually an easier way and a more natural way. And I think when you start cultivating these trusted relationships, you're going to find that not only does it end up meeting that first agenda, but it meets agenda 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 because you're starting to plant seeds that end up bearing much more fruit than just that transaction. So if you do want to try this trusted relationship thing too, I want to give you a couple warnings. Sounds really great. One warning is It's not for the faint of heart. By you trying this trusted relationship thing, it means you're committing to hearing the whole story, not the soundbite of another person. It means really listening with curiosity to a person, really spending the time with that person. So it does take patience. It does take compassion. It does take empathy. And just sit with that for a minute. Because imagine if each of us dialed up our empathy and compassion just a little bit. What a different community we'd be seeing right now. So it does take those to work. The second warning, I'll tell you as well, is it actually takes a process. You can't start forging these wonderful connections with people and then drop off the face of the earth. Having a formalized process to keep in touch with people and make sure that you're thinking of them and they're thinking of you and maintaining a healthy relationship, like any relationship, is strong and important. Like any trusted relationship, whether it's family or whether it's a person you meet at a networking reception, it takes reliability, consistency, transparency. So make sure you've thought of a process in place to keep those relationships alive and fresh. And the third warning I'll tell you is, it's addictive. It's addictive. Once you start doing this, you'll find it's actually really hard to be transactional. When you start asking someone these transactional questions, or they start asking you, it just a light goes off in your head. You know the difference. It feels physically different to you and uncomfortable in a lot of ways. So try it, but know that it's a bit addictive. It's a bit addictive, and especially when you see the results, you just want to do it more and more. So I give you all the challenge. I'm sure you all have things on your agenda coming up, on your itinerary coming up, that allow you the opportunity to network with targeted strangers. And I encourage you to really think about what approach you'd like to take next time. Transactional response or trusted relationship? And I'll give you a hint. Networking is broken. Our desire to connect is not. Thank you.